Hello, I'm Ron Franklin for Bassmaster's Classic Yearbook. 1995 marked the 25th anniversary of the Bassmaster's Classic. Although this was a significant milestone in professional bass fishing, it will probably be remembered more for what Mark Davis accomplished than anything else.
1995 marked an historic moment in the Classic Championship.
But 1995 at Greensboro, High Rock Lake, the first year in the history of bass that the Angler of the Year won the Classic in the same year.
Now think about that. At that point, I think the Classic was probably a 25-year event. In 25 years, with all the great fishermen, the Rick Klons, the Roland Martins, the Larry Nixons, the Hank Parkers, nobody had ever won Angler of the Year and a Classic in the same year.
11 pounds, 4 ounces market. There you are, B-Team. There's your winner of the Bassmasters Classic.
It was also the first time that the defending champion was not there. As we know, tragically, Brian Kerchal died in a plane crash in December, right after his Classic victory.
23 years old, there's your winner, Brian Kerchal, the Connecticut hamburger flipper who retired today.
The thing I remember most about that Classic was how Kerchal was the topic, the fact that he wasn't there and what might have been.
Brian was such a credit and a plus for bass fishing. Here's a guy that first Federation angler to win the Classic and tragically died in that plane crash.
To lose an angler, but to lose the Classic champion is one of the lowest points in BASS history.
It's a shame, you know, that he was taken away from us before he ever got to reach his potential.
It's just tragic that he was not able to fulfill his dream to the extent that he would have.
None of us that were there at that Classic will ever forget Brian. There's no telling what kind of an angler he could be today.
We can only imagine what it would have been like to have a Federation angler at a Classic as the defending champion.
Brian Kerchal wasn't there, and he should have been there. And it still stirs my emotion to this day.
It's one of those things you almost had to be there to grasp what I'm trying to say, but he was there even though he had passed.
The champion of the Classic rides a Ranger, takes a victory lap in the Ranger around, and since Kerchal was defending champion and not there to defend his championship, they dedicated the Classic to him and sent a Ranger around with his championship trophy in it to make that lap, and it was just an eerie, eerie moment.
My wife, Marcy, said that it was pretty scary when the boat, without anybody in it, went around the Coliseum.
Everybody in the stands, all the media, everybody connected with the Classic had tears in their eyes.
We had to do something to honor what he had done, to remember him, but we didn't want to turn the Classic into a funeral.
It put a damper on the mood there, but it was something I'm glad they did because they recognized the fact that something that had happened, that may never happen again, occurred right there on High Rock.
There was a definite mood at the 95 Classic with Brian Kerchal's passing. It was sad, but it was also impressive how people fell out in support of him.
It was a very meaningful moment that this tragedy had happened, but we would buckle it up and go on.
All right, fellas. Fellas, let's check one more time. Make sure your lights are on, your life vest is completely zipped and strapped, and your kill switch is fastened.
Well, High Rock is a really neat lake. I think it's a great classic lake in the fact that it's not that big, but it has a lot of diversity.
A great structure lake, a lot of cover, a lot of rocks, a lot of stumps, a lot of ridges, river channels.
Lots of ways to catch bass. There's a good shallow population there. There's also a good deep population of fish there.
You know, it's a good lake. It gets a lot of pressure. All the locals there, they know every rock verbatim.
Lots of boat traffic, lots of docks.
In the 1994 Classic, local favorite David Fritz finished a disappointing 21st. And with the Classic return to High Rock in 1995, David Fritz felt he had something to prove. But once again, being the fan favorite is not always good for your fishing.
David knows the lake as well as anybody, and that's definitely an advantage.
Well, High Rock is the lake that I grew up on. It's a lake that I pretty much, I didn't learn all my fishing techniques there, but I learned a lot of them.
I have fished High Rock with David Fritz, and he knows little small spots that nobody else knows. He knows where there's 3 rocks in a pile here. He knows where there's a bush that extends out off the top of a creek ledge over here. I mean, he has a huge advantage.
And the disadvantage is that because he's from there and everybody knows him, that they all expect him to do well, and he was under the microscope too. I mean, he had a lot of boats following him around.
You always knew where David Fritz was. It's not that big a lake, so I mean, if you're fishing, you can pretty much kind of look around and see, but you always knew where David was because David would have like 75 boats watching him.
That's another thing in that fishing the Classic that most people don't understand or haven't experienced. It's when you got about 6 or 8 or 10 boats following you just to watch you fish. I mean, that's awesome. You know, I can imagine, I can't imagine how Fritz feels when he's got like 60 or 70. And I could see him out there all day at High Rock following him around.
I had seen a lot of spectator boats, but never in my life had I seen so many spectator boats lined up at High Rock Lake waiting on David Fritz.
So every time he'd fish a spot that first day, all the boats would gang around, mess him up while he was fishing it, and then when he'd leave, they would fish it, and so it wiped out 5 or 6 of his spots, 5 or 6 of his holes. He couldn't go back to really anymore. I mean, not hardly, because then they were wiped out.
I remember whenever David moved, we could always tell because it sounded like a train was starting up.
It was this massive armada, and in the middle would be David Fritz, you know, and then all of a sudden he'd pack up and he'd have to weave his way through the boats to go to his next spot. He'd get to his next spot, and here they come. I don't know how he'd even be able to cast because all the boat wakes and everything like that. And
I still don't think he could compete well enough to win with that many spectators around him. It really took him out of the hunt.
Yeah, another big one.
He literally could barely cast in any direction where it wasn't just solid boats.
95, I had a real good chance, opportunity to win, and I had to fish on the win.
Oh, he's a big one too.
If I could have went to High Rock and no spectators were on the water, then yeah, I think I would be real confident that I could have won it.
He had a good tournament there, but it's hard to win on your home water.
Although David Fritz was considered one of the favorites on High Rock Lake in 1995, nobody was on a roll more than Arkansas's Mark Davis.
Mark Davis from Mount Ida, Arkansas, had a tremendous year as far as being able to win the Angler of the Year title.
Angler of the Year is not one tournament. The Classic's just one tournament. Angler of the Year is the whole season, all year long. Every tournament you compete in, compiling the points, putting it all together, beating the weather, making sure you don't have any boat problems, motor problems, you don't have any physical problems. You're there every day of the tournament. You're chugging away and catching fish, no slip-ups, and all of a sudden you're Angler of the Year. That's hard to do.
Every day, every tournament, every fish, every move you make, and it comes down to that last day. There was one accolade that nobody had been able to capture, and that was to win the Angler of the Year and the Bass Classic in the same year.
When he pulled into contention and it became a fact that he might be able to win, that became an interesting sidebar to see if it could be done.
Unless you've won Angler of the Year and been to that classic, I don't think you'd understand. But the focus and the pressure that's put on you after you win Angler of the Year, it's tough. It's tough to go out there in that classic. They expect you to do well. You're under a microscope at that point. So to go out and win the classic while you're the current reigning Angler of the Year, it's tough.
Man, I was just on top of the world. Winning the classic, never even, honestly, I never even thought about winning the classic.
Mark had been probably over 350 pounds, and it was affecting his fishing.
I had reached a point to where I could not really compete with these guys. I mean, you look at Kevin, for God's sake, and Rick, and all the guys. I mean, they're all slim, they're in shape, and here I was, I weighed like 390 pounds.
He'd gotten a little overweight, and it was affecting his energy, and it was very appropriate, I think, for him to want to lose that weight.
Winning the Classic or Angler of the Year or something, there again, that's something that you always strive for, but he knew he would never be able to accomplish those goals at the weight that he was.
I had it here. I knew how to fish. I had it here. Physically, the hands, the cast, all that was there, but carrying that weight, it just drug me down. If you don't feel good, you don't think good. If you don't think good, you're definitely not fishing good.
Mark knew if he was going to make a living at fishing, something had to change.
One of my sponsors said, "Man, you ought to try surgery." And I'm like, man, I've never even been a doctor in my life. I'm not about to go have any kind of surgery. But the more I thought about it, I thought maybe that makes good sense. Maybe that's something that would get me back on track and get the weight off and kind of a fresh new start.
Mark had stomach gastritic bypass first in January, and then I had it in March. And then that fall, we started traveling together full-time as a family.
Health-wise, career-wise, the weight loss that I underwent in 1994 was the most helpful thing that I've ever done.
And we saw his fishing improve measurably after the weight started to come off. He felt a lot better, had a lot more energy, and it was much easier for him to fish.
If I had not lost the weight, I'd have been out of pro fishing a long time ago. That's the truth. I'd have been out of it a long time ago. Lost 155 pounds. Next year, win Angler of the Year.
It's just amazing how a little life change like that can bring out your full potential. Mark started blossoming that year in '95 into his full potential as a fisherman.
Yeah, I just won Angler of the Year. I'd been 9 years on the tour without a big win of any kind. Made a living, made some classics, had sponsors, but lightning just hadn't struck yet.
I remember Mark coming into the Classic off the Angler of the Year race. I was very confident, and each day it got stronger and stronger.
Mark was in the zone. I mean, he was in it, and there was no getting him out of it.
He got in that zone just like Rick Clunn's been in, just like Denny Breyer's been in, just like a lot of fishermen have been in. And when you get in that zone and things are going right, you can't do any wrong.
Mark Davis stock went up, and I was happy.
There were a lot of different patterns going on in '95. A lot of people came in thinking, well, it's going to be one flipping, because Brian had won it the year before flipping, and Biffle was second flipping. But that year was a different year.
We get to the lake, and the fish are suspended. And I'm racking my brain trying to figure out how I'm going to catch these fish that aren't relating to the bottom. And I happened to think of these brush piles. And everything just fell into place after that.
He had a series of brush piles he had found that had been put in there by crappie fishermen. Interesting enough, the bait he had that he was fishing was a crankbait.
This is a bomber, fat-free shad. It really won the tournament for me.
Mark was fishing down in Flat Creek down there. He was throwing a big spinnerbait and a big crankbait around brush piles. And, he just caught a couple of bigger fish. That's all you can say.
When he gets on fish, you better look out, because he's a master at keeping up with them and knowing where they move and how to make adjustments to continue to catch them.
Mark Davis is a great all-around fisherman.
There's not any part of the game, light line, deep water, shallow water, he's good at all of it. In this lake, the Classic, he was catching them on deep brush piles, on the creek channel bends.
That's what we want.
He was catching them on a spinnerbait and throwing it over those treetops and then slow rolling it back up to it and get over the edge of it and then helicopter it down and let it drop on the other side. That's how he was catching his fish.
Spinnerbait trick.
He's an excellent offshore deep water fisherman. And that year, High Rock played right into his hands.
It was electrifying weighing in that last day, and it's an emotional high that you can't really describe to anyone. Then you realize, hey, you know, pinch me, am I alive? Am I awake? Is this really happening? And it is.
Now, Mark Davis has got to have 14 pounds and 7 ounces, and folks, I don't think he's got it, but he's going to be somewhere in the neighborhood. That'll help right there. That bass is going to go 3 pounds, so that gives him about 4 1/4 pounds right there. You got to have 4. He's got 2 bass and 3 to go. All right, that moves him up, gives him about 8 pounds. That's 3. Let's go, Mark. All right, there was another. This bass, this could be so close to him. All right, one more time. Mark Davis, 4 bass. He's going for his 5th. There he is, maybe that will do it. Maybe. I don't know. It's too close to call. I don't think he's got 14 1/2 pounds.
It's going to be close, Ray. Real close.
Mark Davis. Folks, he's got to have 14 pounds and 7 ounces to take the lead for Mark Harden. Friend, we don't want to waste any time.
No, don't waste any time. I've been out there too long now. I feel like I got a big egg beater right in the middle of what belly I got left. I don't think it'll do it. I don't think it'll be enough.
Got to be 14.7. You made it! 16 pounds and 4 ounces! You made it, Mark! You're the Classic champion!
I can't believe it, Ray. I had an outstanding day. I tell you what, it's the good Lord bless me. I've got to echo what Mark Harden said earlier. It's a blessing just to be here. It's a great day. He gave me a tremendous blessing today. Let me hold a couple of them.
Folks, those are the 2 bass that made him a millionaire. Right here.
I remember 1995 Classic as being kind of the education of Mark Davis. He became the first guy in the history of the Bassmasters Classic to win the Angler of the Year and the Classic Championship in the same year.
It was definitely a turning point in Mark Davis's career to win Angler of the Year and the Classic in the same year. But it was something that we all knew Mark was a great fisherman. And obviously it was his time.
It was just Mark's turn, you know. When it's your turn, you could probably not even go and win, so it was his turn.
At one point on the second day of the tournament, I hooked 2 bass on the same lure, 1 on each hook. I've got a limited bass in the live well already. One of the fish are really big, 4 1/2 pounds. One of the fish is a good keeper, but I don't really need him at all. I'm gonna throw him back. And I swing these fish up with my rod, and that 20-pound test line, and my rod bows and it doubles over real big because of all the weight. And just as I clear the gunnel of the boat, both fish come unhooked. My lure goes flying up in the air. The 4-pounder hit the side of the boat, teetered and went in the boat, and the 2-pounder went in the lake. And I got my fish. And without that fish, I wouldn't have won. Now, see, now that's breaks. And you can call it luck. I call it breaks. That was a good break. Because I could have lost both of those fish. I could have caught the little fish, but no, I got the one I needed.
It's hard enough to win Angler of the Year anytime, but then to win the Classic also, that's really special. Nobody's ever done that, and it takes so much to put those 2 together. I don't know if it'll ever be done again.
Well, I tell you, Mark did a great job. That is an awesome feat that I don't think has been duplicated before or since.
People started taking Mark Davis more seriously. He used to be the brunt of all the fat jokes at the Classic, but you don't hear much of that anymore because Mark has become quite a superstar, and I think he's the consummate pro.
He's had a tremendous career as far as tournament fishing. He's more than just some lure slinger.
You know, up until that time, I had fished, I think that was my 5th Classic. I'd been fishing professionally for 9 years, so that was the real turning point in my bass fishing career.
Mark won the Classic handily. I mean, he dominated the competition during the Classic, blew everybody away, found the best quality of fish.
Everything just fell into place. If you look back at that, when I was 7th after the first day, I was 3rd after the 2nd day, and I was 1st after the 3rd day. And that's the right progression.
And to win the Classic for us was just like it was a true dream come true, which Mark knew at 7 years old that that's what he wanted to do, is fish for a living, and so that had been his goal forever.
He hasn't won any other tournaments. If you're going to win one, that's the one to win. But he's made it, you know, he's so consistent. He's won Angler of the Year, what, 3 times now? So that speaks volumes for his consistency and his fishability. But winning the Classic and the Angler of the Year in the same year, something no one else has done, it put him in on a separate plateau.
The only victory Mark Davis has ever had was the 95 Classic at High Rock.
When Mark Davis was crowned Angler of the Year during the ceremonies, various ceremonies of the Classic, and then the final day to come in as the winner, that's never, ever been done.
The biggest thing that's ever happened to me in fishing. It's almost a bliss, you know, it just goes by so quick, and it's over. You like to go back and just kind of savor just a little part of it, you know, just do it over again, you know, because just that fast it's over with, and you're out of there, and then all the hard work starts.
Riding in the boat, doing the victory lap, there's nothing like that. It makes every wasted lure trip for the wrong lure, by the time you get back with it, they're not biting that, or getting up at 3 o'clock in the morning, or washing the boat down. It makes all that worth it. You forget all about that. That's the best feeling in the world. You really feel like you've finally accomplished what you set out to do.
I never set any particular goal as far as making the Classic, winning the Classic, winning Angler of the Year, winning 10 Angler of the Year titles, which, you know, I haven't done that yet, but I'm working on it. But it was never any of those things in particular. My lifelong dream was always to fish, to make a living and be able to make a living and raise a family and doing something that I love.
Fresh from his Classic win, Mark Davis boarded a plane with trophy in hand. On that flight, he was seated next to a lady who asked him if he just won some fishing tournament. When he said yes, he had, she proceeded to tell him that the year before, she sat on a plane beside a young man holding the exact same trophy. That champion was the late Kerchal. For Bassmaster's Classic Yearbook, I'm Ron Franklin.